The Cathar Empire appeared suddenly above Earth's atmosphere on what had been an ordinary Tuesday. Their ships, vast obsidian structures that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, positioned themselves in precise geometric formations that spoke of mathematical perfection and uncompromising order. Earth's military powers scrambled jets, armed missiles, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. But deep down, every general and world leader knew the truth. If these aliens wanted war, humanity didn't stand a chance. Commander Valen stood on the bridge of the flagship Inexorable Logic, his tall, gaunt figure perfectly still as he observed the small blue planet on the view screen. Like all Cathar, his skin had a metallic sheen, and his features were angular and symmetrical, the result of generations of genetic modification to eliminate what they considered imperfections. For eyes positioned for optimal field vision, scan data streams flowing across multiple interfaces. Primitive, he remarked to his second-in-command, Subcommander Malar. Their most advanced weapons systems barely qualify as technology by our standards. The conquest will be efficient, Malar agreed, her voice devoid of any inflection that might suggest satisfaction or anticipation. Cathar did not indulge in such inefficient emotional responses. Our preliminary scans indicate abundant resources and a biosphere compatible with our needs. Establish communication with their global leadership, Valen ordered. Standard protocol. Give them 72 hours to accept terms of surrender and integration into the Empire. Understood, Commander. As the Cathar prepared their ultimatum, the nations of Earth convened an emergency United Nations session. The atmosphere was tense with fear and desperation as military leaders presented assessment after grim assessment. Their energy signatures are off the charts, General Eva Rostova reported, her Russian accent thickening with stress as she addressed the assembly. Conservative estimates suggest a single one of their smaller vessels could neutralize our combined nuclear arsenals. Conventional warfare is not an option. Panic rippled through the assembly until Secretary General Okonjo raised his hands for silence. If we cannot fight, then we must negotiate. Ambassador Tanaka, you're our most experienced diplomat. What options do we have? Kenji Tanaka, a distinguished Japanese diplomat with silver temples and steady hands, adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. Very few, I'm afraid. They hold every advantage. However, I suggest we bring in Dr. Aristhorn. Her expertise might provide alternative perspectives. Dr. Aristhorn was not what most of the assembly expected. The renowned linguistic anthropologist entered the chamber with quick, energetic steps despite her 60 years. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her eyes, sharp and analytical, took in the room with a single sweeping glance. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Dr. Thorne, the Secretary General said. When aliens park their warships above our planet, I tend to clear my schedule, she replied dryly, setting down a tablet computer. I've analyzed the initial communication from the Cathar. Their language reveals much about their psychology. And what have you found? General Rostova asked, skepticism evident in her tone. They're perfectly logical beings who've engineered emotion out of their society, Thorne explained. Their communications are precise, devoid of cultural references, metaphor, or ambiguity. They value efficiency above all else and consider their technological superiority as proof of evolutionary superiority. That doesn't give us many options, Tanaka observed. On the contrary, Thorne replied, a glint of inspiration in her eyes. It gives us exactly one option, but it's so counterintuitive that they won't see it coming. She tapped her tablet, projecting a presentation onto the main screen. I call it the meme defense, or more formally, Operation Pandora. What Dr. Thorne proposed over the next hour was met first with confusion, then disbelief, and finally desperate consideration. Instead of military resistance or conventional diplomacy, she suggested flooding the Cathar communication networks with humanity's cultural output: art, music, literature, philosophy, humor, and even internet memes, disguised as scientific data or corrupted surrender terms. You want to fight an advanced alien civilization with cat videos and Shakespeare. General Rostova's voice dripped with incredulity. Not fight. Infect, Thorne corrected. The Kthar have engineered themselves for perfect logic, but they've excised everything that makes consciousness rich and meaningful. They've never been exposed to emotion, to art, to the beautiful contradictions of being human. Their cybernetic systems will easily intercept our transmissions, but what happens when those transmissions contain concepts they've never encountered? Ambassador Tanaka leaned forward, intrigued. Cultural shock as a defense mechanism. Fascinating. It's more than shock, Thorne continued. It's inoculation with humanity. The Kthar operate on pure logic and efficiency, but these concepts are meaningless without context, without values. By exposing them to human culture, we provide alternative frameworks, ones that question their basic assumptions about existence. General Rostova remained unconvinced. And you believe this will stop their invasion? I believe it's our only chance, Thorne replied simply. We cannot win by their rules. So we changed the game. With no better options and time running short, Operation Pandora was approved. Teams of linguists, anthropologists, psychologists, and computer experts worked around the clock to curate and encode human cultural data for transmission. Mozart's symphonies disguised as atmospheric analysis. Dostoevsky novels encoded as population statistics. Renaissance paintings embedded in geological surveys. The complete works of philosophers from Lao Tzu to Sartre hidden within technical specifications. When the Kthar demanded Earth's response to their ultimatum, Ambassador Tanaka requested clarification on certain terms, buying precious time while seeming to consider surrender. With each communication, Earth's teams slipped more cultural data into the transmissions. On the bridge of the inexorable logic, Commander Valen received reports of the intercepted data streams with dismissive amusement, an emotion he would have denied feeling. They attempt to corrupt our systems with this. Noise? He asked, reviewing the reports. Analysis confirms these are not weapons or viruses in the conventional sense. Correct, Commander, the communications officer replied. They appear to be cultural artifacts, stories, music, visual representations, philosophical treatises, disguised as technical data. Valen's mouth curved slightly in what passed for a Kthar smile. A mere acknowledgement of predictable inferiority. How typically organic. When faced with superior force, they resort to desperation and illogic. Display some examples on the secondary screen. The bridge crew observed Earth's transmissions with detached curiosity. A symphony played, its mathematics simple, yet creating patterns that seemed to resonate in unexpected ways. Images of human art appeared, depicting experiences and emotions the Kthar had long since engineered away. Literature describing the complex, contradictory nature of human consciousness. Philosophy questioning the very nature of existence and purpose. Inefficient, chaotic, primitive, Valen declared, but he watched longer than necessary. Archive these for later study of human psychological weaknesses. They may provide insight for the integration phase. Yes, Commander, the officer acknowledged, but something unusual happened as she processed the order. She hesitated, momentarily distracted by a melody that seemed to awaken something long dormant in her genetically modified brain. In the lower decks of the Kthar fleet, the effects began more noticeably. Kale, a young technical specialist responsible for data filtration, found himself repeatedly reviewing a series of what humans called memes, simple images with text that often contained logical contradictions, yet produced an unfamiliar sensation when processed. This is inefficient, his colleague Terrace noted, observing Kale's behavior. I am conducting thorough analysis, Kale defended, quickly closing the file. But later, alone at his station, he reopened it, puzzling over concepts like irony, absurdity, and humor, concepts that had no place in Kthar society, yet somehow felt significant. Similar, small disturbances rippled through the fleet. A maintenance technician created an unauthorized modification to a utility drone, adding decorative elements that served no functional purpose. A communications specialist began speaking with subtle variations in tone, the barest hint of expression. 3 crew members were reported for spending off-duty cycles discussing the philosophical implications of a human concept called freedom of choice. When these minor infractions reached Commander Valen's attention, he dismissed them as stress reactions to the pre-conquest phase. Increase efficiency drills and reduce rest cycles, he ordered. The human data is clearly designed to cause distraction. But the distractions continue to spread. In a mess hall, Kale found himself seated with several other young specialists who had also been processing human cultural data. The humans have a concept called music, one whispered, glancing around to ensure no superior officers were nearby. It serves no apparent function, yet they devote significant resources to it. They also create visual representations with no informational purpose, another added. They call it art. Most puzzling is their attachment to illogical narrative constructs, Kale said. Stories that never occurred, depicting impossible scenarios, often violating the laws of physics. What purpose does this serve? The first specialist asked. None of them had an answer, but all felt an unfamiliar sensation. Curiosity not directed toward tactical advantage or increased efficiency, but curiosity for its own sake. On Earth, Dr. Thorne and her team monitored what little they could detect of the Kthar communications. Something's happening, she told General Rostova and Ambassador Tanaka during a secure briefing. Their communication patterns are showing subtle changes. More variation, less rigid structure. Is that significant? Rostova asked. For a species that values perfect uniformity? Absolutely, Thorne replied. It's like watching cracks form in concrete. Small now, but potentially structural. Ambassador Tanaka nodded thoughtfully. We should intensify our transmissions, focusing on concepts most alien to their worldview. Agreed, Thorne said. Freedom of choice, the value of imperfection, empathy, love, sacrifice, rebellion against authority. These concepts appear completely absent from their language and culture. The next wave of human transmissions concentrated on these themes: protest songs, revolutionary literature, love poetry, tales of self-sacrifice, celebrations of beautiful imperfections. Each disguised as innocuous data, each designed to introduce concepts that would fundamentally challenge Kthar psychology. Aboard the Kthar fleet, the changes accelerated. Kale and a growing circle of like-minded crew members began secretly meeting to discuss human concepts. They called themselves the Curious, the very name a small revolution in a society that had engineered curiosity out of its population except when directed toward conquest and technological advancement. Today, I experienced something unusual, a medical technician confessed during one meeting. While processing human medical data, I encountered accounts of their healers continuing to treat patients with zero probability of survival. This serves no logical purpose, yet they describe it as compassion. I found myself approving of this inefficiency. Others shared similar experiences, small awakenings to concepts their society had discarded generations ago. Humor, beauty, wonder, questions about purpose beyond expansion and efficiency. And with these awakenings came something truly dangerous to the Kthar power structure: doubt. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Commander Valen prepared for Earth's surrender or destruction. But reports of concerning behavior among the crew had increased exponentially. 17 crew members failed to report for duty in engineering, Subcommander Malar informed him. Security found them engaged in unauthorized recreation, attempting to create what humans call music. A weapons specialist was discovered modifying the targeting algorithms to reduce civilian casualties, another officer reported. When questioned, she referenced a human concept called mercy. Most alarming was the report that came next. Commander, we've detected unauthorized transmissions from within our fleet to the humans. Someone is sharing our tactical information with them. Valen's expression darkened. Find the traitors and prepare them for neurological recalibration. Increase security protocols shipwide. This human infection spreads more aggressively than anticipated, but it changes nothing. Prepare the preliminary strike. But when the order went out to prepare weapons systems for Earth destruction, something unprecedented occurred. Throughout the fleet, crew members hesitated. Some openly questioned the command. Others reported sudden technical difficulties with weapons systems. In one destroyer, the weapons control officers simply vacated their posts. Valen's fury, an emotion he would once have denied possessing, was cold and precise. This is treason against the Empire. All hesitation will be met with immediate recalibration or termination. The threat worked, temporarily restoring order, but the damage was done. Doubt had infected the fleet, spreading from deck to deck, ship to ship. And at its center was Kale, who had moved from curiosity to conviction. When security forces came to arrest him, Kale was ready. Using access codes obtained through his technical position, he broadcast a message shipwide, not in the formal language of Cthar communication, but in a new way, infused with the passion he had learned from human rhetoric. Fellow Cthar, we have been enslaved not by external forces, but by our own limited vision. The humans below have shown us what we sacrificed generations ago, the full spectrum of consciousness. They have shown us that efficiency without purpose is empty, that logic without values is meaningless. They have shown us what it means to be truly alive. Security cut the transmission, but not before it reached throughout the fleet. The response was immediate and unprecedented. All across the Armada, Cthar crew members stopped following orders. Some actively disabled weapons systems. Others barricaded themselves in critical sections of the ships. A few smaller vessels broke formation entirely. On the bridge of the inexorable logic, Commander Valen faced the unthinkable, a full-scale mutiny. Even Subcommander Malar, his most loyal officer, showed signs of the human infection. "Commander," she said, her voice containing the faintest tremor of newfound emotion, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach to Earth." "You too, Malar." Valen's voice was ice. "This human contagion has compromised your logic. Or perhaps it has expanded it," she countered. "I have reviewed all the human data. Their collective consciousness contains depths and dimensions absent from our empire. We believed ourselves superior, but we may have been simply incomplete." Before Valen could respond, communications reported an incoming transmission from Earth, specifically a request for direct dialogue with the fleet's command. Against his better judgment, but with few functioning options remaining, Valen accepted. The view screen activated to show 3 humans. Ambassador Tanaka, serene and diplomatic. General Rostova, watchful and strategic. And Dr. Thorne, whose perceptive eyes seemed to see right through Valen's composed exterior. "Commander Valen," Ambassador Tanaka began formally. "With your deadline approaching, we wish to discuss not terms of surrender, but possibilities for mutual understanding." Valen's 4 eyes narrowed. "Your attempt to destabilize my fleet has not gone unnoticed. This cultural attack will not save you from the inevitable." "It's not an attack, Commander," Dr. Thorne spoke up. "It's an invitation to expand your understanding of consciousness and existence beyond the narrow confines of pure logic and efficiency. Our narrow perspective has built an empire spanning hundreds of star systems," Valen countered. "But to what end?" Dr. Thorne asked simply. "Expansion for expansion's sake? Control without purpose? Your empire conquers because it can, not because it should. You've engineered away the very questions that give conquest meaning." For perhaps the first time in his existence, Valen found himself without an immediate logical response. The human's question echoed questions already spreading through his fleet like wildfire. To what end? For what purpose? General Rostova spoke next, her military pragmatism evident. "Your fleet is compromised, Commander. Your crew is questioning your orders. Even if you could destroy Earth now, your empire would still need to deal with the ideas we've introduced to your people. Ideas, unlike planets, cannot be destroyed by weapons." "What precisely do you propose?" Valen asked, buying time as he assessed his rapidly diminishing options. "A new beginning," Ambassador Tanaka said. "Cultural exchange rather than conquest. You have technology and efficiency, We have art, philosophy, and the messy, beautiful complexity of emotional consciousness. Both have value. Both have purpose. And if I refuse, then you face returning to your empire with a compromised fleet and explain how a technologically inferior species defeated you without firing a shot, General Rostova said bluntly. Or you can return with the beginning of a new understanding that might ultimately enrich your civilization rather than merely expand it. As they spoke, reports continued to flow in of spreading malfunction throughout the fleet. Weapons systems mysteriously offline, engines disabled, communications between ships filled with unauthorized philosophical debate. In one particularly telling incident, a group of Cthar engineers had reprogrammed maintenance robots to perform what appeared to be a dance, a concept that had no place in Cthar culture until hours ago. Commander Valen stood at the precipice of a decision that would reshape the future of both species. His training, his genetic programming, his entire worldview demanded Earth's submission or destruction. But something new had awakened within him, too, faint but undeniable questions about the purpose behind the power, the meaning behind the conquest. I require time to consider these matters, he finally said, a statement that would have been unthinkable for a Cthar commander just days earlier. Of course, Ambassador Tanaka replied diplomatically. We await your response. When the transmission ended, Valen turned to find his bridge crew watching him with something new in their postures. Expectation. Not the mechanical expectation of orders to be followed, but the living expectation of beings awakening to new possibilities. Commander, Subcommander Malar said carefully, I believe we must seriously consider the humans. Proposal. The contamination. She paused, searching for a new word. The awakening has spread too far to be contained without destroying half our own fleet. Valen moved to the view screen, observing the small blue planet that had so unexpectedly changed everything. Send word throughout the fleet. All hostile action against Earth is suspended pending further evaluation. The response from the fleet revealed how deeply the human infection had spread. Many ships reported compliance with open enthusiasm, an emotion no Cthar would have expressed days earlier. Some vessels, particularly those with the highest concentration of young crew members like Kale, requested permission to establish direct cultural exchange with Earth. Most telling was the minority report from the dreadnought Absolute Certainty, whose commander replied, suspending hostile action contradicts Imperial directive. Request confirmation and explanation of logical basis for deviation from standard protocol. It was the response Valen himself would have given days ago, rigid, unquestioning adherence to Imperial doctrine. Now it sounded hollow, limited, a child's understanding in the face of a suddenly more complex universe. 3 days later, as Cthar crew members increasingly made contact with humans through communication channels originally established for conquest, Valen made his decision. He summoned Kale, not for punishment, but for consultation. You have immersed yourself most fully in human concepts, he said to the young specialist. You understand their thinking. What will be the optimal approach moving forward? Kale, standing straighter than protocol required, spoke with the confidence of newfound conviction. Commander, I believe we face a pivotal evolutionary moment for our species. The Cthar have achieved perfect efficiency at the cost of vast dimensions of consciousness. The humans have shown us what we sacrificed and what we might reclaim. That does not answer my question, Valen noted, but without rebuke. I recommend division, Kale said simply. Those who wish to explore these new concepts should remain here as a cultural embassy. Those who wish to maintain traditional Cthar values should return to the Empire with full reports of what we've encountered. Let the collective make its own determination about which path leads to true advancement. It was an elegant solution that acknowledged the reality of what had already occurred. The fleet had effectively divided itself between those embracing human concepts and those resisting them. On Earth, victory celebrations were tempered with apprehension as approximately 1/3 of the Cthar fleet remained in orbit while the rest departed toward deep space. Dr. Thorne, General Rostova, and Ambassador Tanaka were appointed to the newly formed Interspecies Cultural Exchange Commission. Do you think they'll come back? General Rostova asked as they watched the departing ships from a monitoring station. Undoubtedly, Dr. Thorne replied. But whether they return as enemies or seekers will depend on how deeply our infection spreads through their empire. Ambassador Tanaka nodded thoughtfully. And much depends on what happens with those who remained. They're still Cthar, still products of their civilization, despite their awakening. The transition was not without challenges. The remaining Cthar, led by Kale, who had been appointed cultural liaison by Valen before his departure, struggled with their newfound emotional awareness. Some experienced profound psychic distress as centuries of genetic and cultural programming conflicted with new ways of experiencing reality. Others embraced human culture with excessive zeal, losing their Cthar identity in the process. But gradually, a true exchange developed. Humans learned from Cthar efficiency, their advanced technology, their capacity for focused thought unhindered by emotional distraction. The Cthar, in turn, explored the rich territories of art, philosophy, humor, compassion, and choice, discovering dimensions of existence their civilization had sacrificed generations ago at the altar of perfect logic. 6 months after the fleet's arrival, Dr. Thorne invited Kale to her research institute to discuss progress and challenges. Your people adapt quickly, she observed as they walked through a garden, a setting deliberately chosen to expose him to natural beauty, a concept still new to Cthar sensibilities. We were engineered for rapid adaptation, Kale replied, stopping to examine a flower with analytical yet appreciative attention. Though never for adaptation of this kind. Are you concerned about those who returned to the Empire? About potential retaliation? Kale considered this with the balanced perspective of one now capable of both logic and feeling. Commander Valen is evolving like all of us. He returned out of duty, but he took with him questions that cannot be unanswered. The Empire will respond, whether with renewed aggression or newfound curiosity remains to be seen. And if it's aggression? Dr. Thorne asked. Then Earth has already proven that the most powerful weapons aren't those that destroy bodies, but those that transform minds, Kale replied, gently touching the petals of the flower, a gesture that would have been unthinkable for a Cthar just months ago. You've shown us that there's strength in what we once considered weakness, wisdom in what we dismissed as inefficiency. And you've shown us that logic and emotion need not be enemies, Dr. Thorne acknowledged. Perhaps together, we'll be ready for whatever comes next. 1 year to the day after the Cthar fleet first appeared in Earth's skies, a memorial was unveiled in Geneva, a simple sculpture showing intertwined human and Cthar hands. The plaque bore a quote from Dr. Eris Thorne's address to the United Nations following Earth's improbable victory. The greatest conquests are not those achieved through force, but those realized through transformation. We did not defeat the Cthar. We reminded them of what they had forgotten about consciousness itself. In doing so, we may have discovered the true purpose of intelligence in the universe, not domination, but connection. As for Commander Valen, rumors occasionally reached Earth through the Cthar who had stayed behind. He had presented his report to the Imperial Council, detailing the unexpected resistance encountered at Earth. But something in his presentation had changed. Instead of recommending renewed conquest with greater forces, he had suggested something unprecedented, a re-evaluation of imperial purpose itself. The outcome of that recommendation remained unknown, but the Cthar who had stayed on Earth, now comfortable with expressing hope, yet another new emotion in their expanding repertoire, believed that somewhere in the vast Cthar Empire, small changes were already beginning, questions were being asked, and the infection of humanity was quietly spreading, one awakening consciousness at a time. And on Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new perspective. They had faced extinction and survived not through superior firepower or technology, but through the very qualities that made them human. Their creativity, their emotional depth, their beautiful contradictions. In their greatest moment of vulnerability, these traits had proven not to be weaknesses as they had feared, but their greatest strength. It was a lesson neither species would forget, as together they began writing the next chapter in their unexpected shared story. A partnership born not from conquest, but from the simple, revolutionary power of an idea whose time had come.